how can we create this sense of connection, equality? How do we bring our hearts into those situations as well as our minds?
Yes.
And that's all in a kind of design and invitation. How do we really slow down to ask, how can I ask a question in a way that really makes people want to answer? Part of Town Anywhere is that people build up in the future. They take a journey into 2035, and we ask people to find a place in their imagination with a chair that could be their home. And then they bring in a neighbor and they exchange a memory or story with a neighbor. Then they build up with a few other people and they look at their street. And the whole frame is how it can be a thriving, connected, regenerative town.
Welcome to the Being Human Myth podcast, a space where we seek to explore the power of myths and imagination in the context of a humanity going through a liminal era and in transition towards the regeneration of our inner and outer worlds in order to leave a brighter future for the next generations and for all life on this beautiful planet that we have as a home. Today, I bring you a conversation with Ruth Ben-Tovim. Ruth is a cross-disciplinary community artist, educator, activist, and community facilitator. She specializes in participation and in the art of invitation. She began work in London as artistic director of Louder Than Words Theatre, combining new writing and live art. From 2004 to 2020, based in Sheffield and now Totnes, she was the creative director of Encounter Arts, midwifing over 80 social and ecologically driven collaborative projects and public interventions across the UK that brought people together across different backgrounds, sectors, ages, and cultures to look to the past, acknowledge the present, and vision for the future. Ruth held local and national roles in the early stages of Extinction Rebellion, and she catalyzed the Culture Declares Emergency movement. She is currently one of the co-directors of Walking Forest, a 10-year international project combining women, trees, and activism, and is also the co-coordinator and facilitator of Town Anywhere, a large-scale collective imagination time travel community visioning process. If you don't know or haven't heard about A Town Anywhere, I am leaving a link to a short film about it. I suggest watching it before listening to the episode. It is truly stimulating and heartfelt. I am leaving all the links to Ruth's work and social media on the show notes. Thank you for being here and enjoy this beautiful, profound, and inspiring conversation. Thank you, Ruth. Initially, thank you for being here. Thank you for your time.
You're
And
really welcome.
I just love to begin the conversation with this question to get to know you better. How was your call to adventure, to our life, to become an activist, a facilitator, and to look for a purpose larger than yourself?
It's a great question, Alex. It's great to be here. I feel like I was brought up to be an activist. Really. I think I have my parents and my grandparents and my great-grandparents even who come from a line of activists. So my kind of great-grandparents were peasants who emigrated from Croatia to America. And they became communists and they became activists at the turn of the century. And they were organizers against injustice, for rights, really. And my grandma and my grandfather, they were very, very involved in the sort of 30s as well, fighting fascism. And they emigrated here to England, where I am. And really that carried on in my mother and father, who were involved in the women's liberation movement, in campaign for nuclear disarmament and for anti-racist work. And as a kid, I just remember so many marches and demonstrations and community events going on. And it really felt that I had a place there. I was always a kid with quite a loud voice. And so I'd be one of those 8-year-olds on a march saying, what do we want? And I'd be that young voice, or I'd be selling badges, or, I'd be there kind of at the door, opening the door for people coming in for meetings in my house. And so it felt that I really grew up with this sense of a responsibility, really, to try and bring about equality and to try and change the world. And sometimes over my life, that's felt a burden, this the feel of responsibility, but mostly, I suppose, I became quite a young activist in the student movement. And then really through my art, which we'll speak about maybe a bit more, I found a way to combine my politics. And really always for me, it was this sense of justice and equality that's always been very important to me. Is how do we find a space and a way that people can be equal and people can be free and people can find their own empowerment and make their own decisions. And I suppose that stayed with me in my life. And I think it's also that being an activist, it's not just altruistic, it's not just because it's something that I should do. It's also because throughout my life so far, it also gives so much. It gives that sense of solidarity, working with other people, of possibility, of collectivism, of joy, even when we're facing really, really difficult times. So I suppose that's what keeps me going as an activist, really, is this sense of what you give and what you gain and the balance in there.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I was hearing your conversation with Rob, and it really struck me like it's so beautiful what you're doing in Totnes, and I'm just curious how this community emerged, like in Transition Town Totnes, and how did you come to start the Town Anywhere? Can you talk us a little bit about the story and how it emerged?
Sure. I mean, Totnes, the group of people, including Rob and Naresh and Sophie and Ben and Peter, there was some people who kind of got hold of the transition idea that Rob had catalyzed over in Ireland, and they happened to converge in Totnes and develop this idea of a transition town, a town that can transition to away from peak oil. And I think with the alchemy between all of them, they managed to create a way that this transition network that was bigger than Totnes could form and cascade internationally. I think if it hadn't been the alchemy of those different people with their different skills together, looking at the inner work that's needed, the outer work, the system to organize such a network, the ideas behind it, it might have stayed quite small, but it was of its moment and of its time. And it's like Totnes is a place where lots of people pass through. It had a history well, and it's this meeting of people who can then together catalyze and make something happen. And so then the transition network internationally grew with this idea of different towns and different communities taking on these ideas to do change themselves, bearing in mind the need to transition away from peak oil, and that how that can also bring joy to our lives. I think that combination of facing into something that is damaging and dangerous, but to say we can do that in a way that actually can enrich our lives through food projects, through energy projects, through working together, through taking power back into our own hands, it meant that a lot of people could get on board and find an agency in that. And so Transition Network grew quite quickly to be made up of, now hundreds of transition groups across the world. And Town Anywhere happened is that in the early days of transition, they used to have a conference every year where they would gather different transition groups together from across the world to meet and to kind of look at each other, to learn from each other, to work together, to exchange to really develop the transition movement. And again, one of those alchemy moments. I've been in Totnes now for 14 years, and had met Rob and also Sophie Banks in particular, who's part of the inner transition, and Rob, who I knew, and they were looking for something for the transition network that would allow everybody together to experience maybe what would it feel like if transition was in one town. If we could really imagine what that system would be like, because at the time in particular, if you think, I think we did this 12 years ago, or the first time we did it, so a lot's changed in that time about people's awareness. But a lot of transition and other initiatives like that, it's like they were quite isolated in their towns or their places. It's like there's a small project, but the system, and it's still true, the system that we're working with is still a kind of dominant exponential growth, kind of really ignoring a lot of what's happening. So really the challenge that was set to me as an artist and a facilitator was, could I design something and a process, part of their conference, that could give people this feeling of what it would be like to really feel like if transition was everywhere. And so I worked with a team of other facilitators, Chrissy and Joe and Lucy and Sophie. It was a and Rob, and it was a sort of team effort. But in the end, we came up with this idea of Town Anywhere, which would be take all those people from initially, I think there was 300 in the first process, to take everyone on a journey into the future. We did it as 2030, where in effect we were in a zero carbon future where there was care and well-being and connection, where we were transitioning away from peak oil, and to have that experience together of building and inhabiting and embodying that future through making, through play. And that's where some of my theatre background, I'm a theatre director, and a participatory artist. That's where some of my skills, I suppose, came in designing something that was body, heart, mind, spirit, if you like, together, but that was a immersive journey, really.
Sounds like you were like the perfect person for this, for Town Anywhere. It's like all your abilities, all your skills are right there. Like I was thinking about the personal challenges. We're right in this spot, like we are like want to change the plan of our city. We are just, I was telling you about in the email, and I want to propose Town Anywhere to do it as a collective, but my main concern is the human challenges. And how did you overcome like how did you take decisions, when you weren't agreeing on something? Sometimes the ego wants, someone wants to do something that the other person doesn't want. How did you deal with that?
I think that it's probably, one of the things I have learned through working in theatre is about collaboration. And it's that people can, I think sometimes there's a desire that we should all be the same and we all need to take exactly the same decisions together, and we can get a bit paralyzed. And I think that my learning from theatre is more this idea that we can have different roles and different skills, and we can fit in to a whole. So in the design process of Town Anywhere, it was like, for me, it was a bit like in my role as a theatre director, I'm a director, I'm having the vision, but I work with highly skilled people who are lighting designers, set designers, actors, everything else. So for me, a lot of it is about team. How do you build a team for Town Anywhere? If it was coming to your, to your place, or when we've done it recently in Hull, or we've just done it in Bristol, how do the people who want to bring Town Anywhere, how do you create a team where and it's happening in Tooting in London, that can really speak to people's strengths? And how can you keep getting out the way so your ego doesn't lead that? And how can you really step into the sort of larger purpose or larger reason why you're doing it. And for me, it's partly why I actually left conventional theatre and went to work more in the public realm. It's because for me, there's the sense of this extra layer of what are we doing this for? You know, when we do Town Anywhere, we're doing it for the participants' experience. We're doing it for that experience of what the ripples of that could be. So I think I say to people when they want to bring Town Anywhere as an experience that they need to create a team, and that those team needs to be able to understand different roles. And really it's about communication. And in more formal terms, you know, I've used sociocracy, I've used consent-based decision-making processes. I was very involved in Extinction Rebellion, and we adopted a whole series self-organizing systems and sociocracy, and I think they can work really well. But also at the end of the day, there's also the work we have to do on ourselves to try and be self-reflexive about how am I helping here? How can I get out the way? How can I bring my intervention in a way that's trying to serve the whole? So I think good communication, good team, understanding your differences and having processes where it's clear who's making what decisions really helps.
Beautiful. And do you have like a recommendation? How many people do you think the team should have? I mean, it can be 50, 20, 10, 5. Do you have like an idea?
I think that I might take Tooting at the moment because they're about to live, hoping to do a version in Tooting in London of about 200 people. They're working really, really hard to get a very good mix of ages and ethnicities and different people. And what they did is that there's two people who are the coordinators of that. So they're working together. And then they built a support team of about, I think it's 7 or 8 people. And in a way, part of the role of the support team is to go out and try and recruit other people. So the team built comes from the transition group there, but also slightly wider. And somebody's more leading on the kind of arts and making aspect of it. But everyone is trying to say, okay, this is the step. Now we're doing recruitment. Somebody needs to do the publicity. Somebody is contacting this group. Somebody's contacting that group. So the two coordinators in effect are holding the overview. And then they've brought in a wider team of about 7 or 8 people who are kind of going out and helping recruit and champion it. And they're going out on the street and speaking to somebody. So I'd say that a team really to have a couple of people who are, and they often work with me. So when we do Town Anywhere, I'm also working closely with that team. But that team is creating a local team of about 5 to 10 people who are really holding it.
And do you in this part of the process do you involve municipalities like the local government in any part?
Yes. So that's a good question. So with Town Anywhere, it's like Town Anywhere is a process, and who wants to bring Town Anywhere to where they are is open. So we've had situations before where it's the municipality themselves have said, we have a plan and we want to consult people. And in a way, they're commissioning Town Anywhere because they can see that will fit like Hull, where we've just recently, or in Tooting, or we're doing one somewhere else. The people who are organising it are not from the municipality, but they already have connections and links with them because they're a campaign group, or they're a voluntary sector group, or they're a movement group. So in that situation, they would invite somebody from the municipality to be on that team. That would be ideal. Or they would work very hard to make sure that people from the municipality come to Town Anywhere, come to the experience, so that they can see what that's like, and that can feed into some of the plans that the municipality is doing. So it can work either way. It all depends on who's bringing in Town Anywhere. So in one place, say in Tooting, the transition movement and the group is quite it works a lot with different groups in the community. And in a way, the transition group got funding in order to bring Town Anywhere in. But they, a bit like you're saying, they also want to direct or advocate, or they don't want to be passive receivers of the municipality's plan. They want to be active in them, because often how municipalities or councils here create their plan is not very participatory.
Yes.
So in a way, and that's the same as what's happening in Hull. So it's almost like the independent voluntary campaigning group sector is saying, we're doing this experience. We want you to come because we want you to learn and be part of the outcomes of this that could cascade into your work. We want to influence you, and we want you to also listen to us. So it feels as if we're at a time of shifting power a bit between municipal-led plans, which are still there because they're the elected governments, but also a lot of the people plans that are coming up alongside it and saying, we need to be more involved here. We need to change the paradigm. We need to change the system. And so we want you to also listen to us.
Yes. Yes.
That's that. So I think that's what's happening.
I mean, the moment I can't believe this is happening. Just yesterday, I was signing the document that we are going to send today to the municipal, because we don't want their urban development program, because that will impact the whole area, for the years to come, because it's going to be the zoning. This is the most important document that we can have in our territory. Yeah. So we are a large group. I am not that savvy about the rights and on the legal issues, but they are, and I am more focused into things like this, like collective imagination and all these processes. And I'm just thinking, I want to pick your mind about all the experience you have, and we have different challenges in our territory. For example, we have the Mayan communities close by that they usually get excluded. And we have, for example, myself, that I come from a lineage of the Spanish, and I'm like a different kind of Mexican. We have this mix in our territory here. Do you have any experience in integrating these different cultures, different?
Yeah, I have. I mean, it's over the years. So for the last 17 years, when I've been doing work like this, that it's one of my, it infuriates me how local governments sometimes make decisions in a way that is so undemocratic and doesn't involve people. And some of it is that people don't know how to do good community involvement and community engagement. And they think that they can tick a box, or they can hold a meeting, and then they say, oh, we've done our consultation. We had one meeting, or there was a board up and people could come and have their say, and that's it. And I don't know, I'd be interested in, was there any public consultation for the plan that you're talking about that's going to have so much impact?
Yes,
there was some.
It was, but it was most of the people attending there what was public servants, and they
exactly.
and then I want to talk about the art of invitation, because the invitations they made, it was almost non-existing.
Yeah, it's so systemically everywhere. And
yeah,
and I suppose in my experience, it's a hard slog, because sometimes you can find the person in the municipality who is open to maybe doing the consultation or the process a little bit differently. Because at the end of the day, most municipalities or council do have a remit to be acting on behalf of their citizens.
Yeah.
We elect them. They're in there. So their remit is that they're supposed to really find a way to involve people. Often the way that they seek to do that is so tokenistic and so excluding of what they call hard to reach groups. And in my training sometimes with those councils, I'm saying, Well, who are they hard to reach by? They're not hard to reach by themselves. They're hard to reach by you because you're not making any efforts to find a way to connect with those groups. You're having a meeting at this time. You're not thinking about translation. You're not thinking about intercultural mix. You're not thinking about childcare. You're not thinking about food. You're not thinking about how you can reach people. You're not thinking about people's lives. You're doing it in your terms, in your way, and you have the same old people who are responding. So really, one of the only, how I found is through advocacy, is through trying to find the person in the council or the municipality who's willing to try and do things in a different way. And I've noticed that in England, because a lot of our systems are collapsing to some degree, because there's a lot of there's more councils who are saying, actually, what we've been doing isn't quite working. We don't quite know, that there's a bit more opening sometimes for there to be advocacy and dialogue, but it's hard.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I found a magic wand, but I have found some municipalities, some officers, some people who are willing to listen, particularly if you have a sense of what you want to do instead. So there's lots more stuff around people's assemblies being talked about, or for us, I've done a lot of what we call creative consultation and engagement. So how you can bring in artists and designers to work with communities to translate and build their ideas. But a lot of it is about the will of the municipality to do it. That's one hand. The other thing is where people, you're talking about kind of saying no, doing like a Joanna Macy would say, a holding action, where you say, no, we object to this. So that's, for me, that's really valid. We object to this. We're trying to say no. And then the other thing is where you say, we are going to take some control and we're going to try and do some of this for ourselves. We're going to try and have a people's assembly, or we're going to try and have a visioning process that we can say back, this is actually what we want. So it's almost like the ideal would be that the council had done a better consultation for this, what sounds like really important piece of legislation or plan. It's clear that they haven't. So are there any openings where there can be a negotiation with you as a group of community organizations, maybe? Can you say no? Does it have to extend to protest, which sometimes it does, Is it a demonstration? Is it protest? Is it negotiation? And then at the same time, is there a way that you can say, and this is our plan? So there's a way that as a community, you can organize yourselves a different vision that you then try and influence. So I suppose there are different ways that I think it's possible to try and change that situation. But I understand the dilemma you're in. These plans are important.
There are so many things I want to ask you, Ruth, but I want to stick to my main questions to take most of the time. How does a good invitation looks, feels? Does it have a smell? Does it have a taste? How can I invite this group of people that I am collaborating with right now to create a town anywhere? How do I invite them? How would you recommend me that I invite them?
Yeah, well, I think there's in a way, I just want to separate out the town anywhere bit of it from the general thing about invitation, because in a way, town anywhere is just one approach to a vision. It's like a catalyst for other things. So yeah, for me, this sense of the art of invitation, I sometimes run a training with people who are trying to engage other people. And some of those things are about when you think of a time when you've been invited to something and you feel a part of something, or you feel you've been hosted well, or you feel that your voice has been listened to. We all have those moments in our life when we've had those experiences. It could have been like an amazing party or gathering or meal. It could have been a particular time when you were really listened to. Maybe that was in your work or with friends or in a campaign, or when you really felt part of something. I often say to people, what are the conditions that make up that feeling that you've had?
Mhm.
And sometimes people might talk about the simple things. It's the language that's used. It's the way I was invited. It was a beautiful card, or the language, or we had a meal together, or I felt part of something because everybody was listened to, because of the structure of this gathering. How we designed it wasn't just people speaking at a table at the front. It was because it was arranged in this way. It was because there was story. It was because there was. So for me, I always say we know those things about in ourselves when we feel invited. And how can we, as people who want to invite other people, how can we use that almost common sense and apply it to our work or our activism, rather than just save it for our personal life? So that's one thing. Is it's like, how different mediums can you use? Different ways in, because we're not just one way. How many different ways can you bring people in? Can people speak in twos? Can they share stories? Can you eat together? Can you use making? Can you use your different skills? Can you design things? Can you bring in people of different ages? So how can we create this sense of connection, equality? How do we bring our hearts into those situations as well as our minds?
Yes.
And that's all in a kind of design and invitation. How do we really slow down to ask, how can I ask a question in a way that really makes people want to answer? That's what I say, rather than, oh God, that's really boring.
Wow,
So when I'm designing consultations, I might be asking things like, what makes you smile? Who would you like to thank? What question would you like to ask? If you were having this day in 20 years' time, what would you be doing? What would you be tasting? What would you be smelling? What would you be hearing? Different ways of weaving all the past, present, and future in. That's often a tool as well. So for me, these are some components around how to design a good invitation, is to weave in different components. Even if it's a 2-hour gathering, it's really possible to do that. From the second people walk in to they leave, it says something about the world that we want, and it also says something about how we're going to be together. And for me, it's a lot of it is about the question. What question are you asking, and how can you ask that in a creative way? How can you pull people in? There's some of those things, and that can be applied in a 2-hour meeting or a 10-month project.
Wow, yeah, you're so good at this, Ruth. I can completely know. I can tell that you know this, and I mean, thank you for this illuminating answer. And that leads me to, do you have any tools like for Town Anywhere? Are you thinking about sharing tools, courses? And also, I heard in the conversation you had with Rob that you have a course of the art of invitation.
Yeah.
Do you plan to take that course like to a global scale? I don't know.
Yeah. So that's a great question on that basis. I think in terms of tools, I have a set of principles which I'm really happy to send you and share with you, that I've learned about the principles for invitation. And I won't go through all of them, but some of those principles for me when you're designing or wanting to involve other people are things like, it's not where you're going, it's being on the road that counts. That's a Jack Kerouac quote, but it's really that we can get very attached to outcome and end goal, and we can really forget about, actually, it's a bit like being on the road and who is with you on the road. That's a really key principle for me. Who am I inviting? How do I invite them? What tools do I use to invite them? And then also, just another principle for me is that I always really challenge myself to think, how far am I prepared to go to be maybe out of my comfort zone to invite people to participate with me? I use this example of one project I did, and I had to go into a kind of working men's club in the middle of Eastleigh. And I was nervous, and I was like, yeah, it's right that I am here a bit nervous, rather than I'm over here in a meeting saying, come to me. Like, why should they? If I'm doing the inviting, I really need to look at how I can be in my stretch zone to invite people, how I can really listen and say, how could I reach that person? So I'm really happy to share these principles.
Please.
Also, yeah, I've designed this course called The Art of Invitation. And it's a 1-day course that we do online. So we could definitely bring it, you know, and that is a 1-day introduction really to this art of how do we design good invitations that allow people to participate. And it's a practical course. And that's there. There's also a fantastic book that I would recommend, which is called Playing for Time, Making Art as If the World Mattered by Lucy Neal. And she's a friend and colleague, and she also co-facilitates Town Anywhere. But in that, she's interviewed about 60 artists who work in this way. And at the back of the book, there's a whole set of recipes for people to design their own work in this way. Really like, and I outlined one of the things I'd been doing was taking over disused shops for 10 years and using that as a place for people to come in and exchange memories and stories, and thinking there I've got a recipe for what could you do in a shop to do that. So there's a lot of giveaways in there that people could use. And Joseph Rowntree Trust have just published a toolkit for imagination infrastructure where there's a lot of ideas in there.
I was there yesterday.
You were there yesterday, yeah, so was I. So in a way, for me, there's something about personally, the art of invitation is an offer. Town Anywhere, we are looking, I've just run the first apprenticeship program for people to learn how to facilitate Town Anywhere, because I'm really keen to cascade and offer that out. And so we did do one online with 100 people who did Town Anywhere, even though it's very embodied. We did it online one time, and people had their cardboard and their string and their bits of things in their room, and they were online and they were making together. So I'm thinking again about wanting to do another international one of those, so that then potentially people internationally could learn. And then also part of what we're saying with Town Anywhere is that once people have experienced a Town Anywhere themselves, then I'm also really up for running apprenticeship programs so that people could then have that tool and could run that. So some of it, because Town Anywhere is quite complex, it's not just a handbook that I can say, here you go. It needs people to experience it. And then I really want to say, great, I'd love to train people to be able to use that more in that way. So we do want to cascade it and to share that learning, and also those principles around engagement and involvement. They're so vital.
I suppose the principle talk about also like in what should we invest more time and more effort, more energy, right? Just like focusing in the principles should be like the starting points to start creating the Town Anywhere.
Yeah, so in terms of whether it's Town Anywhere as a visioning process, you know, some of that is around slowing down to think that the inviting and the recruiting and the bringing people together is a really important part of a process. And really thinking about the fact that if you can get 200, 300, 100 people together in a room from different communities, from different backgrounds, and really go, how do we make this representative of our municipality or of our area or of our town or our place? Because we did one recently in Bristol and there were 80 people there, but it was interesting that people were coming in, and always for me, what's a good test is when people don't know everybody there. You know, it's that people know a few people, but they don't know everyone. And then they suddenly see their place a bit differently, because we're often quite siloed into our group and our people. We're suddenly being in a place with 100, 200 people who are in your place, but you don't know them all. That's what happened in Hull. That's very powerful. That's a kind of weaving together. And we know that the municipalities are strong, but actually we as people and citizens are also strong. And this sense of thinking, could you have something where you bring people together? How could you do that to really invite people? What kind of event would it be? How could people vision together? How could you bring the people together that the municipality is failing to do? And what might that be like?
Before we started the conversation, I saw the video you created of Town Anywhere, and it's really emotional. I gotta confess that it makes me cry. Like I just feel so inspired by it. And part of the purpose of this project, of this podcast, is sharing inspiring stories. Do you have a story, like inspiring story about Town Anywhere? That's something that you would like to share?
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Alex, for that reflection. I really appreciate that a lot. And there's I feel that. So Town Anywhere, I've been doing on and off for the last 10 years or so. And I feel that it's sort of knocking at the door at the moment. You know, times in your life when you have things that are knocking at the door saying, can you give me a little bit more attention? And we made the film, and the film has really grown. And people have seen it. But I do, when you talk about that, just what I'm thinking about is because we just did one very recently. So we had people, and there was one venture. So part of Town Anywhere is that people build up in the future. They take a journey into 2035, and we asked people to find a place in their imagination with a chair that could be their home. And then they bring in a neighbor and they exchange a memory or story with a neighbor. Then they build up with a few other people and they look at their street. And the whole frame is how it can be a thriving, connected, regenerative town. And then they start leaving messages for what they would like, all the different aspects of a town, learning and governance and food and goods, what they would want to see there. And then they start to find a role for themselves in that town. How could they respond to some of the wishes of the town? And they get together in small groups, and then they make ventures. They make projects with cardboard, with string. So there was this one group in Bristol, and they made a kind of earth temple, they called it. And in it, it was a place where you could go at different points in your life to really be able to mark the different transitions of the year and your life. So adolescence and parenthood and elderhood and death and the seasons. And they made that, and they inhabited that world. And there was many other amazing ventures that came out of it. Anyway, we did the Town Anywhere. And then because in Bristol, it was happening in a festival, we left up all the models that had been made from cardboard for a 2-day festival with thousands of people at this festival, and hundreds of people then came we said, there's a time portal. You can come in and see what some people made. And it still touches me. There was these 3 women who just come to the festival. They hadn't really known anything about Town Anywhere. They came in, and they literally sat in this cardboard earth temple that had been imagined a few days before by one group. That gone. They sat in this cardboard that around it just had this idea that it was these stages of their life. And they stayed in there. It must have been for about 2 hours. 3 friends. I think they had their pina coladas with them. That wasn't part of our Town Anywhere experience, but was part of the festival. And they literally said that cardboard and that idea had allowed them to speak about so many things from their life that as friends they'd never spoken about before. Wow. They said they were speaking about their birth, they were speaking about death, they were speaking about divorce, they were speaking about the future, they were speaking about the past, they were speaking about the summer. And that was just from this hint of a possible world that one group of people had created. And it was so moving. I kept going back, and they said, oh, are we hogging this space? And I was like, no, you're fine. You're fine. You can stay in there for as long as you need. So there was something about that translation from a group of people who had imagined that within quite a held process, that a few days later, the traces of that, the idea of that, could appeal and connect with some people who'd come to a music festival, who sat in there, and it enabled them to be in the future as well as talk about their lives. And that was touching for me.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that story, Ruth. Really beautiful and inspiring. Wow, the time has flown. Before I ask you the last question, Ruth, where can people find you? Where people can find your work, your social media?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Ruth Ben-Tovim.
Mhm.
I don't know whether you can put that at the end of your podcast,
I will
Alex, or
put
you
it in
can
the show
put on
notes.
there.
Mhm.
So it's and hashtag town anywhere.
Mhm.
That would be the best place. So it's Ruth Ben-Tovim.
Mhm.
Is where people can find me. Or you're really welcome to put my email address as well at the
Great.
bottom of your
I'll do
podcast.
that.
I'm very, very up for that. Really up for speaking to people.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And
And the last question, it's, I would say, my favorite question at the moment. As you said before, the importance of questions.
question.
I really feel in the era we are living now, in this transitional liminal era, I know it feels far off, but I truly honestly feel we need a common purpose for humanity, like recognizing that we all depend on the same air, on the same water. We all live in the same planet. I truly feel that sometimes we forget this basic truth.
Yeah.
What do you think should be the purpose for this human family?
It's a big question, Alex.
Yeah, I know.
I feel this sense of a purpose is trying to always think for the 7 generations ahead in our decision making. I think that to really look to our relationship with the more than human, to really see on a daily basis how we can be in reciprocity and build that relationship. I think also for me, part of the purpose is finding this balance between grief for what we have lost and for what we have to really face into, what colonialism, what Western Enlightenment kind of supremacy has, the impact of that on our world, that we have to really unlearn some of what we have been conditioned, particularly in the global north. And we have to, unlearn to find this sense of interconnection, interdependence, and that purpose for freedom for all beings, and equality and reciprocity for whether that's the river, whether that's my grandson, whether that's people whose, the systemic violence of our system, the capitalist system is causing. We have to take responsibility, those of us whose lives are privileged because of that, but also we have to find a way to find the compassion, the connection, the dialogue with each other, and also to find the joy and the grief and the challenge in our lives, and importantly about connection.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Ruth. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your work. I really appreciate what you're doing and what you're sharing.
Thank you.
I say it with an open heart. It's beautiful.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Alex, and thank you for inviting me, and I've really appreciated this conversation.
Yeah, me too, Ruth.